was so desperate to have done with the whole affair, he nearly ran slap bang into the form of Linton. "Miss Linton," Marley said, "if we are needed somewhere urgently, then perhaps we should be on our way." "Hush," Linton hissed. "You are in the presence of your director." She indicated the corridor. Before him, Marley could only see a pile of theatrical clutter, canvas offcuts, torn flattage, spliced and respliced ropes, the oddments of hemp and hope. There was no one there at all. Then, all at once, like an optical illusion, Marley saw, in the mound of rubbish, the figure of the king, slumped in a tattered throne, crown in hand and head bowed in contemplation. "Thy hour is almost come, Marley," said the king. "My lord," said Marley, seeing the chance to attempt to free himself of the charge, "I will do what I can, but Scrooge, he's a man fixed. He will not easily listen. I am afraid, my lord, I am afraid." The king regarded Marley sorrowfully. The bell began to jangle louder. Linton broke the moment. "My lord, Mr. Marley has had his call." "What would you have me do?" asked Marley. "Tell the tale of your prison house," the king said simply. "Show him the fetters that bind and torture you, and that one day will be his. Harrow up his soul and freeze his thin blood." Marley felt his chains grow colder as the king spoke on. "Hold yourself up as the mirror to his own nature, and do not let him flinch from the likeness. Burn yourself upon his conscience. Oh, speak to him, Marley. 3 spirits shall visit him, 3 nightmares of his own rendering. Charge him to list, for his very soul depends upon it." The king sat back down, exhausted, onto his throne of canvas and rope, and just as suddenly as he appeared, was simply detritus once more. "I shall, my lord," said Marley. Linton took Marley by the hand and dragged him running pell-mell through the corridors as the sound of the bell got louder and louder. "Right, 3 spirits," she said. "Got that? 3 spirits, not including you." "Yes, right, 3 spirits," agreed Marley. "And he said to agree to the whole thing," she continued. "But," said Marley, "but me no buts, Mr. Marley. Make him agree doesn't mean he's got to understand what he's agreeing to." "Oh, you mean I'm to trick him like you tricked me?" Marley asked. They stopped outside the entrance to another stage. Suddenly, Linton's voice was a whisper. "No," she said. "I don't expect it to be as easy to fool as all that." Before he could speak, Linton pressed a finger to Marley's lips and led him into the dark and cavernous space. The set here was a large box constructed out of flat canvas panels, open at the front but with no visible entrance at the back. Behind this set stood a small group of spectres. There was a rural lady who gave off the faint smell of smoke, a Tudor gentleman, a nobleman of the vacuously poetic variety, a Georgian lady, and some kind of wild man. They all stood around a table, tinkering with various pieces of equipment in order to provide effects for the theatrical scene. The Georgian lady was the source of the ringing, for she was shaking away at a handbell for all she was worth. The rural turned a handle that in turn rotated a barrel over which a coarse sheet was draped. This produced a sound not unlike rushing wind. The poet played with metal chains in a tin tray, coaxing scrapes and jangles out of them that set Marley's teeth on edge. The wild man stood with a lantern on a pole, shining a beam of light at the stage area, whilst faintly murmuring the word moon. The final member of the group, the Tudor gentleman, stood holding a large wooden trapdoor open. "Bloody hell," he whispered. "Where do you think you've been?" "I think you'll find we're on time, Bone," hissed Linton. "Bloody just," he answered, and slammed the heavy trapdoor shut with a report so loud that it shook the set, sent dust flying up into the air, and toppled the Tudor's head from off his shoulders. The rest of the ghostly crew all murmured, "Showtime," and the curtain at the front of the stage started to rise. Marley looked at Linton. He could see no place for his entrance. Linton rolled her eyes and pointed at a space on one of the canvas flats. There was a very simple outline of a door and a doorknob drawn upon it in chalk. Marley approached it and put his hand out. It passed through the canvas as if it wasn't there. Aware that he now had one hand in whatever space that set represented, he decided to let the other one join it, and arms outstretched, he walked forwards. It was a large room in a grand house, and yet it was furnished in a way so that one person may live out of this room alone. It was sitting room, bedroom, lumber room, all in one. A meagre fire lay in the grate, which, upon Marley's entrance, sprang up into a ball of flame and then blew itself out. A bowl of gruel clattered to the floor. It had tumbled from the high-backed chair which held Scrooge. With the trappings of the counting house gone, the suit, the hat, the coat, it was plain that Scrooge was as mean to his own health as ever he was to his fellow man's. He sat there, gaunt, mouth agape, in nightcap and gown, darned and redarned socks, his tatty muffler at his scrawny neck, a bag of bones held together with cruelty and spite. The sudden appearance of Marley had obviously shocked Scrooge, and yet he found enough courage to summon his voice. "How now?" he said. "What do you want with me?" Marley heard the echo of that first question that he had asked the unrevenged king, and so, recalling how the king's reply had struck such horror into his own heart, he attempted to recreate that moment in its entirety. Summoning up every iota of sonorous import that he could, he pointed his finger at Scrooge and intoned, "March." This did not have the desired effect. Scrooge attempted to bat Marley's finger away, but passed his hand straight through it. "I bring you a message," offered Marley. "Who are you?" asked Scrooge. "Who am I?" said Marley. "Oh, not this again. Who do I look like?" "Well, you might look like anyone," said Scrooge. "I am your partner, Jacob Marley," he said. "In life, perhaps," said Scrooge, "but Marley has been dead 7 years. Who are you now?" Marley felt he was getting nowhere. "Ebenezer, can I sit?" "Well, I doubt it, but you're welcome to try," said Scrooge, and indicated a chair opposite his. "At least you won't cause much wear and tear on the fabric, ha?" Marley gingerly lowered himself into the offered seat and gratefully felt it hold him up. He looked across at Scrooge, the jaw set defiantly. It was a look that Marley remembered from life. "You don't believe in me, do you?" asked Marley. "I do not," said Scrooge. "What more do you need, Ebenezer? You have the evidence of your own senses." "I do not," repeated Scrooge. "My senses are not incorruptible. Tell me, which is more possible? That the revenant of my former partner should visit me upon a Christmas Eve, or that I am conjuring this up myself in a fevered state? Yes, that's it. Ha! You, sir, are an indigestion." Scrooge was almost frothing with happiness at his own cleverness. "Yeah, you're something who disagreed with me at dinner. A part-boiled potato, a spoonful of spoiled mustard, a crumb of mouldering cheese. Yes, there's more of gravy than of grave about you, sir. More of gravy than of grave. Gravy!" Scrooge rocked with cruel laughter and repeated the phrase over and over. Scrooge, like so many, was so enamoured of his own wit that he would rather twist an argument to his own advantage rather than confront reality. A knot clenched within Marley's chest. Was he to be mocked by the living as well as the dead? Furious, impotent, boiling anger raged within him. Anger that had brewed and bubbled for over 7 years. He tore the fabric from around his head and let his jaw drop wide enough to spew out all the pain and frustration in one almighty shriek. You have heard, no doubt, of the theory of the primal scream. Well, this was the very antithesis of that. If a primal scream can be said to express all the frustration and anger of being brought into this world, then this scream, Marley's terminal scream, if you will, gave voice to all the injustice and sadness of being ripped out of life without the ability to put right the wrongs conducted within it. It lifted Marley up into the air and rocked the room with its force. Papers flew up from the nightstand and curtains strained at their hooks. The clock on the mantel flew across the room. The mirror crazed and shattered, and Scrooge was pinned to the back of his chair in shock and awe. When the storm abated, Marley found himself glowering down at Scrooge and his chains arrayed around him. Scrooge tumbled from the chair and clasped his hands to his face. "Mercy," he said. "Dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me?" "Will you listen to me, Ebenezer Scrooge?" Marley raged. "I shall," said Scrooge. "Do you believe in me or not?" continued Marley. I do, said Scrooge. "I must. But tell me, Jacob, why do you still walk the earth?" "I am cursed," said Marley, "cursed to walk, and all the time to bear witness." Marley shook his fists and wailed. "Ah!" His chains thrashed about and clanged terribly. "Yet you are fettered, Jacob. Please tell me why." Marley began to float down from his place near the ceiling. The chains draped around Scrooge as he did so. "This chain is the chain I forged in life," replied Marley. "I rendered it link by link and yard by yard. Yet your chain is longer and more cumbersome than mine could ever be, Ebenezer." Scrooge trembled more and more. "I would wager," pursued Marley, warming to his theme, "that yours was at least as full and heavy as mine 7 Christmas Eves ago. And you've laboured on it since, no doubt." "No, not me," Scrooge gibbered. "Tell me it's not so, Jacob. It can't be. I've never owed a debt in my life. How can it be that I've run up a deficit without ever knowing it? Comfort me, man! Comfort me!" "I have no comfort for you," Marley replied. "Comfort is not mine to give you, Ebenezer Scrooge. I merely bring you a message." "Well, is that the sum of your torture, to walk the streets of London? Why, I do it every day. It doesn't seem that heavy a burden to bear, even with the chains." Again, that glimmer of defiance. "All? I should say it is all. You could walk the streets of London for 1,000 years and not see what I see. You will not let yourself see your fellow man in his degradation. It inconveniences you," said Marley. "But you were a good man, Jacob," said Scrooge. "A man of business, like myself." "Indeed," said Marley. "We made our fellow man our business, thinking ourselves better than they. Yet the truth is we are not better, just more fortunate, and we chose to use that fortune unwisely. We could have lifted our fellow man up, but that would have taken time, money, inconvenience." As Marley spoke, his chains coiled around Scrooge, mirroring his own bondage. "In this time of year, I suffer the most," he continued. "In life, why did I walk through crowds with my eyes turned down? Why could I not see my fellow man needed me? Why, Ebenezer, why?" On the edge of hearing, Marley fancied he heard a voice, a female voice with a Yorkshire burr, Linton. "Get on with it, man. Not so damn flowery. You've not got all night." Scrooge gave no indication that he heard the disembodied critic. "Hear me," cried Marley. "I bring you a message." "I'm listening," said Scrooge. "I have procured you a chance of escaping my fate, Ebenezer." Marley said as the trains dragged them closer together. "Oh, thank you. Thank you, my dear Jacob Marley," said Scrooge, delirious with pathetic gratitude. "You were always a good friend to me." "You will be haunted." Marley let the phrase hang in the air just a moment before continuing. "By 3 spirits. That's 3, not including me." He could feel Linton's disdain through the wall, half a reality away. "Oh, if that's the chance you were talking about, Jacob," said Scrooge, "I think I'd rather not." This was Scrooge all over. He would rather damn himself to the 9 circles of hell later than take any discomfort in the present. Yet Marley, he knew what was awaiting himself if he failed this commission. Scrooge's chain. Perhaps he would only be condemned to wear it until Scrooge's demise, but Scrooge was such a stubborn old devil and was likely to hold on to what life he had and eke it out for so many more years. Both men mirrored each other, kneeling, abject, bound together by the chains of their own sin. A thought occurred to Marley. If Scrooge could see him, Jacob Marley, then perhaps he might be able to see other ghosts. "Come, look," uttered Jacob as his chains released their grip on Scrooge. Marley stalked over to the window of Scrooge's room, which overlooked the midnight streets. Scrooge followed. Outside of the window was a sight indeed, and it was clear that Scrooge did see each and every ghost on the street and in the air. Across the square, a parliament of ghosts were tethered together in 2 groups and were spending their time feverishly arguing between the 2 collectives. Neither listened to each other, and neither truly took in the plight of the wretched beggar woman and child that they stood around, and perhaps had been the subject of the original discussion. One ghost, who most definitely did see this ragged Madonna and child, was a white waistcoated chap. This poor wretch was bound by the ankle to an iron safe. He clawed frantically for a key that was forever a hair's breadth away from his grip. He pleaded with anyone to help him. All the time he scrabbled for the key, he implored of his fellows, "I would share it now. Please, help me share it." But less than 100 of the other ghouls could even hear his prayers, and they were too wrapped up in their own troubles to bother with his. As he watched, Marley noticed something about the ghosts and the chains that had never struck him before. And that was that there was no consistency in the effects the shackles had from ghost to ghost. For example, one poor soul might drag long chains wrought with lumps of iron and draped with cash boxes along the street with a little discomfort, but still managing movement, whilst another wretch, with but a single link held in the palm of their hand, from which Marley imagined they could have easily have tossed away, was pinned to the floor by it and grief-stricken by the weight. The sight of so many tortured individuals worked its magic on Scrooge. 3 spirits, he said. Yeah, that's not too many. I should imagine I should be able to entertain their company for a while. Good, said Marley, trying not to sound relieved. Expect the first tomorrow when the bell tolls 1. Are they not to come all at once and get it over with? Cried Scrooge. In truth, Marley cared little for the schedule of haunting. Once this commission was concluded, he, Jacob Marley, wanted nothing more to do with Ebenezer Scrooge. He stuck to his guns. The 2nd will appear the night after, and the 3rd the night after that, Marley said. All around him, the atmosphere grew darker. He could see a red curtain coming into existence and covering the entirety of one of the walls. He knew that his time in this little play had come to an end, and he was glad of it. Yet, he felt compelled to leave Scrooge with one parting shot. Look to me for no more help, Ebenezer Scrooge, he said, as the room folded back into itself and became just a setting for a play once more. For now I abdicate my responsibility for you. Heed the warnings that are given to you. The curtain touched the stage, and Scrooge was gone. And the best of British luck to you, he finished.